Welcome to Silicon Slopes Live. We are here with Congressman Ben McAdams to talk about all sorts of things. But first, Congressman, you had COVID-19. You were actually hospitalized because of this. How are you?
I'm great now. I feel so much better. It hit me really, really hard. And I was symptomatic, feeling awful for about 16 days. And then after the symptoms went away, I still had another 10 days of just feeling like I had been knocked down and uh, kicked around. And so it took another 10 days after that to just get back up on my feet and feel totally back to normal. But I think it's been 3 weeks since I was discharged from the hospital, feeling great, getting in my morning workout and going stir crazy here at home, like everybody
Wow.
else.
Well, it's good to see you up and about. It's good to see your facial hair coming in strong.
Yeah.
Don't succumb to pressure to shave that. Speaking of a man, you're speaking to a man who did to succumb to the pressure and immediately regretted it, Congressman. So don't do that. So you're recovering well. What what do you know now that you've had COVID-19? There's a lot of questions about if you've had it, are you now immune to it?
Yeah. So honestly, they don't know. I'll tell you a little bit more information. So I volunteered to participate in one of these plasma donations, right? And so in order to give plasma, they have to run a series of tests to make sure that you're a good donor. And the one that I'm participating in is a clinical trial as well. So they're being very scientific about how they approach it. So they did a test. First of all, they wanted to make sure that I tested negative. So they did nasal swab on me. And the first time they actually did a nasal swab, it came back positive, even though I was feeling great. And I was still staying at home, but I was feeling great. And they explained to me that it is actually very common with the virus like this to what you have is just fragments of the dead virus still in your body. You couldn't grow it. You couldn't grow it in a lab because it's dead, but it's enough to trigger the test. So the first test came back positive, and they said, even though we are confident that it is not a live virus and you're not sick and you're not contagious, you're going to have to wait. And so a week went by. They tested me again a week later, and it came back negative. And so then they scheduled to have me come in and donate plasma. So I went in to give plasma, and they took they did take some plasma, but they also ran an antibody test. This is the ARUP test that is now nationally available. And they ran an antibody test, and they said that I did have a high concentration of antibodies. I think they said the most we've ever seen. And then they added to that we've only seen 4 people, but it was the most they've seen out of a sample of 4. So take that for what it is. And they said, look, this virus is new. We don't know anything about it. If it behaves like other viruses, you probably have some immunity. And so I've been watching this and reading news and articles about it because I'm personally interested. And they say like immunity to polio will last a lifetime. They'll test people who got a polio vaccine as a child, and at age 85, 90, they are still have an immunity. Something like a cold or something like that, the immunity may only last a couple of years before the body loses the ability to produce those antibodies. So they just don't know with this one. They say that, the scientists will say we don't know because they haven't studied it. They don't have the randomized control trials. Casually, they will say probably you have some immunity. But until they've done the randomized control trials, they don't really know. But probably you have some immunity. And probably it's in at least 3 to 6 months. Beyond that, who knows? So that's kind of what they say is, yes, I probably have some immunity. It's the unknown is enough that I still wear a mask when I go in public because I don't want to risk exposing somebody else. So I'm still cautious and careful. But I think that it is probably abundantly cautious right now, and maybe beyond what is necessary. But I still do it. Partially to model good behavior too. I'm in public service. I'm high profile, and I want people to know that I do believe it's important to wear a mask when you're in public, enough so that I will wear one myself. And so long answer to say, yes, I probably have some immunity. Don't know how long it'll last, but for now, I think so, but I'm still careful.
Congressman, you've seen Governor Herbert say that they're going to start reopening some businesses, reopening parts of Utah's economy, I believe starting May 1st, which is Friday. What is your reaction to that? Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I'm going to say something that I think will probably be controversial, and that is, as Utah's lone Democrat in the congressional delegation, I think Governor Herbert's done a pretty good job of handling this. He hasn't gone too far to the, you've seen some governors who are cavalierly just saying we're opening everything from nail salons to, to everything, to others who are shutting down everything. And I think our governor has actually done a pretty good job of looking at the data, responding reasonably to the data. I'll caveat that by saying I'm sure we're going to look back in 2 or 3 or 10 years and say, if we'd only done this differently or that differently, hindsight is 2020. I think our governor's done a pretty good job of listening to his public health experts, of following the data, and then making calculated decisions about what's best for the state. If you look at it, our hospital system is not projected to, our curve will not go above the capacity of our hospital system. So I think that's good. We are cautious about when we go from this red state that we're in right now to orange, or orange alert, or whatever they're calling it. It's not, he's described it, the governor's described it as not a light switch that you're going from off to on. It's a dial. And we're going to go from shut down to responsibly, moderately kind of inching it up a little bit, opening targeted sectors that are critical to society, like medical procedures, non-time sensitive medical procedures, your hip replacements, your colonoscopies, things that need to happen, but we had the ability to delay them while we were concerned about hospital capacity and shortages of PPE. Now that those seem to be bottlenecks that have been resolved, we can start to resume some of these critical medical procedures. We can start to resume some of these businesses that are really on a thread of their ability to stay alive, start getting some foot traffic into these stores, but do it responsibly. He's still encouraging us to socially distance, to wear a mask, and to be really careful. And so I think it's, like I said, hindsight's 2020. Maybe we're wrong, but right now I think he's doing a good job of weighing all the factors, and then trying to make a responsible decision to move us forward in baby steps. And I would add to that if you do have the luxury of continuing to work from home, for me, I think what the governor's saying is it's a matter of volume. We can have some people out in society. We can have some of this. We just don't want to have everybody out. So I go to the grocery store. I feel like I do have some immunity. I'll wear a mask in the grocery store, but I don't go to the grocery store every day. I do what I've never done before, and that is make a grocery list and save it up until the list gets long enough. And then I go once a week, or even once every couple of weeks right now, to try and limit how much I'm out there. And if we can, each of us do our part to reduce the volume of interaction when we're in this orange state. We may have some interactions, but try to limit the volume of that. If you're going to eat out, and you can do some curbside pickup, that reduces the interaction. I think that's the responsible thing to do. And I think we're doing okay. And for all appearances nationally, Utah seems to be doing better than most places.
Well, what is your sense for the national response as more states begin to reopen, at least partly, areas of their economy similar to what Utah's doing? I hear what you're saying on Utah. I agree with what you're saying on Utah. It seems like Utah's response has been good, particularly in comparison with other states. But what is your sense for as the country begins to reopen and how this has all been managed on the federal level?
Well, I think it's important to note that we shouldn't have a one-size-fits-all approach for the entire country. Salt Lake City is not New York City, and San Pete is not Salt Lake City. And so I think a tailored approach is appropriate, but with the emphasis that each location should follow the data and act responsibly, right? So I think it's important also that the CDC is still advising, and the state of Utah is advising us to limit non-essential travel. What you don't want is to have that cross-contamination of people coming back and skiing or tourism that might cross-contaminate. So if Utah seems to have a handle on our cases, it is not, by the way, it is not gone from our community. It is still here, and we still need to be cognizant of that and careful about that and act responsibly. But Utah can proceed cautiously and take some baby steps that other places may not be able to take right now. And again, I think the key is to be aware of the data and make data-driven decisions. And my concern about some of the other places around the country, take Georgia, for example, seem to be taking a politically motivated path, not a data-driven path. And the public health data has to be our guide, not political factors or factors unrelated to that public health data. And I think that's important. And I would also acknowledge Salt Lake County and Salt Lake City are differently situated. The governor, I think, has tried to leave wiggle room even within the state of Utah. That what goes for San Pete may not go for Salt Lake City, and it is okay to take some differentiated approaches right there. It's a little more difficult because you're going to have that travel between urban areas more than you're going to, you're going to have much less travel between Atlanta, Georgia, and Salt Lake City than you may have between Lehigh and Salt Lake City. You're going to have some of that interaction. So we are kind of all for one for all within the state of Utah. So I think we need to be a little more thoughtful about what policies we adopt within the state, but also still allow some differentiated approaches. If Salt Lake City has one approach and South Salt Lake has a different approach, that doesn't work as well. So be thoughtful about that. And I would commend our mayors, both Mayor Wilson, Mayor Mendenhall, and now I'm going to name all the mayors in Salt Lake County, but I think they've all been thoughtful about it. And the hope would be, again, they are letting the data drive the decision and thinking about us as a region and how we'd approach this for the good of not only the 45-year-old healthy person, but my mother-in-law or my father-in-law who may have underlying health concerns, or someone of an older age, and that let's think about those who also might be affected.
Congressman, I've seen you over the past week or so. I've seen you get really loud, and not that you haven't before here, but I've seen on your social media posts around helping small businesses, around the payroll protection program, these various things. What are you doing at the congressional level? What is Congress doing at the federal level to support small businesses during this time?
Well, so one of the things that Congress adopted was through the CARES Act, and was done in a really bipartisan way. I think it was refreshing to see the Congress come together and work with the president to enact some of these relief measures. Stimulus is probably a few months away, but at least emergency relief to businesses and households that were struggling as we went from the economy going full steam to going right off a cliff, and the impact that had on households throughout Utah. We needed to get some relief out. And so we saw several measures. You saw unemployment insurance funding made available. You saw the economic stability payments that the $1,200 per individual, $2,400 for a couple plus dependents. Though that funding getting out the door, people have been receiving that over the last couple of weeks. And then the payroll protection program to support small businesses. And I think we talk about supporting small businesses. It's important to note that a key provision of that PPP program is to ensure that that funding goes to the paychecks of the employees. So it's not just a small business, it is literally putting money in the pocket of hardworking Utahns so they can put food on the table, they can pay their bills, and get through this. So it was another mechanism you had the unemployment insurance for those who were furloughed, but you had the payroll protection program. And the goal, I think, is to keep people, the hope is that this economy is kind of a U-shaped, it dives off quickly, but then it comes back quickly. and we are able to come back quickly. And the key to coming back quickly is to keep people connected to a job. So whether it's through the PPP program or through unemployment insurance, but having them still connected to a job so we can turn that dial up quickly and get them back. The thing that I've been talking about this week that really is alarming to me are the calls that I've been receiving from small businesses who say, we put in our application on day one and the money ran out before we could get our loan. And then Congress went back. I was back in Washington last week, and we put $250 billion more into the PPP program. And they're saying, and that program went live on Monday. So today's Wednesday. They said, we are worried that that money will run out again before we are able to get our application approved. And then you're hearing stories that are I think, pretty outrageous of entities like Shake Shack getting a huge loan that is troubling, and so I think Shake Shack got a $4 million loan. Well, most of these small businesses that are applying for funding are looking for a $200,000 loan. So for every business like Shake Shack that gets $4 million that they don't need, and look, the idea is the reason Shake Shack doesn't need it, I'm sure they're hurting financially. They also have options. They have access to capital markets. They have debt financing that they can get and other options available to them. And when they go to this PPP group program that is really for small businesses and they take out that $4 million loan, that is 20 small businesses who didn't get their $200,000 loan. That is literally for them the difference between life or death, between getting through the next few months or not. And so for me, that's outrageous to see some of these companies going in and soaking up a lot of the money so it's not available for our truly small businesses. And so, candidly, the legislation didn't give a lot of direction. This was legislation that was put together really overnight almost. I was in the hospital when the legislation was put together, but the goal is to get the money out as quickly as possible. I don't know that I'm necessarily pointing fingers at anybody with this, but saying, look, the moral thing to do, if you are a company who has access to the capital markets, to other sources of funding, look there first and let this money, even though you may be eligible for a PPP loan, if you have other recourses, please seek that and let this money go to some of our businesses that have nowhere else to turn and let them have a chance to get it before it's gone.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I agree with everything you just said, that this money should be prioritized for these small businesses and these large corporations like Shake Shack, Shake Shack returned that, by the way, but
they did. That's good.
Which they should have. And the Los Angeles Lakers did the same thing. I think they got like $4.5 million that they've returned. It's really interesting though. On one hand,
I would commend them for that. I think that's good. Yeah.
It's really like, you kind of wish, hindsight 2020 again, you kind of wish that there'd been some prioritization within the bill, because what these companies did is not illegal. This, they were able to do this, and it's hard. Like, I don't know. I hear everything you're saying and I agree with everything you're saying. I just think it's hard to, with all of that money, it's the payroll protection program. As I understand it, all of this money has to be used to pay employees.
75%. Yeah,
75% has to be okay. So 75% of the funds have to be used to continue keeping people on payroll. It's just hard. Like, big companies also have employees too, and I'm not. And this is in no way me defending these actions, because I agree with you. I think the moral thing for big companies that have access to private markets, they should access those private markets. But I think the Congress. And those who put this bill together, it would have been awesome to just prioritize that right in the middle, right at the beginning, so that these issues didn't even arise. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think, again, hindsight's 2020, right? But part of it is, you see this with legislation that wasn't drafted in the course of a few days, but legislation tries to be broad so that, and because it is hard to, legislation is writing in concrete, right? And so you want to be broad because you want to allow some flexibility for real world circumstances. And so legislation got written broadly, and we didn't know exactly what kind of circumstances we were going to be facing with the pandemic that was happening so quickly and the fallout was happening quickly. Who knew exactly where the hotspots were going to be? So I think the legislation was written broadly. In hindsight, there are probably some criteria that we could have put in there, but hindsight's 2020, like I said. And then you pass it off to administrative agencies that then craft some rules. And I don't know that I'm even pointing fingers at the administration or the administrators of those agencies, other than to say, as we saw this developing, and we saw, I think there was a hotel chain in Texas that got a $96 million loan, right? And they were already well capitalized and had access to the private markets or the capital markets. That's where you want administrative agencies to be nimble enough to say, okay, this is not what the taxpayer intended. This isn't where these tax dollars were intended to be spent. So we are going to give guidance as to who's eligible and who's not eligible. And I think they could have come in and said, under these criteria, if you have to first exhaust these other options, you have to establish that you don't have other recourses, because we could have kept those same employees employed if they had gone to one of the other funding sources that they had available to them and spread this money further. So again, it's hindsight's 2020. I think it's really outrageous that a lot of these small businesses are at the back of the line waiting with their application in hand and not able to get anything. We got to find a better way. We got to be a little bit nimble and find a way to make sure the money gets to the people who need it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And I think you've been highlighting this as it relates to Utah. How are Utah small businesses doing during this? And who are you most worried about or concerned about, or what are some things that the state of Utah or organizations like Silicon Slopes or the federal government can do to help specifically Utah small businesses?
No, I think businesses across the board are struggling, and the thing we need to do is we need to, the health of our country and the spread of this virus is directly related to the economy. And so the first thing we need to do is each of us be responsible, take personal responsibility for slowing the spread of the virus and following to the T. I think the guidance coming from our governor and from our public health officials, that's the best thing we can do right now for the economy. And then as the economy starts to open, which is starting on Friday, get out and support how you can, the economy and the revival, and support our Utah businesses. And as we do that, I think pay attention to the ones that are Utah native businesses, and let's support them and help them get back on their feet.
Congressman McAdams, thanks for everything you're doing. It's good to see you up and about. And again, keep the beard, don't succumb to the pressure, my friend.
Right.
And I'm sure we'll have you on again soon. Thanks for everything you do for Utah. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Clint. Great to see you.
It's good to see you.